Guys, I have a confession to make, and this has really been something that's been weighing on my mind heavily for a while now. And it's been 15 years of living this lie, and I need to come clean. All right, this is my video version of a notes admission, if you will, a confession, if you will. My last name is not actually Here. Steve Here is not my actual full name. My name is Cletus Van Dam. No, I'm joking. My name's totally Steve, and this is WrestleJuice. Welcome back, everybody. And what we're going to talk about today kind of falls in line with what I was just talking about, and that's WWE trying to kill kayfabe and how the response that I've noticed seems to be you guys are being thrown for a loop on this one, at least some of you. And it's an interesting topic, and I'll be honest with you guys, don't expect many answers from this guy as it pertains to what WWE is doing right now. But I do think it is fascinating, and I do think that it is something that makes a fun conversation piece, because I've been having this conversation with some of you since my last video when I was talking about the general reaction to the Raw on Netflix premiere, which that episode of Raw has been probably the most discussed episode of Raw. Discussed, conversed over, not disgusted. And it's for it's for a variety of reasons. Number one, obviously, there's the Hulk Hogan getting booed thing, a lot of conversation about that, but most of it, generally speaking, is kind of like understanding of why he's being booed, and on top of that, how it is hilarious that he is being booed. On top of that, there is the general nature of that episode of Raw in itself, how there were a lot of complaints over, or I've noticed complaints about the fact there were 4 matches in the span of 3 hours, and there was a lot of just sort of Netflix glazing, if you will. Netflix gave WWE up to $5 billion over the next 10 or 20 years, I forget which one it is, to air WWE Raw and a bunch of other WWE stuff on Netflix. Internationally, like everything is WWE on Netflix now. In the US, of course, premium live events stay on Peacock for now, for the next couple of years, I think, and then et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of like Netflix love. It seemed like not a normal episode of Raw. It seemed more like a premium live event episode of Raw. And then I suspect that this coming Monday things will be kind of back to normal. It'll be interesting to see what sort of changes they make over the next month or two, different from what we saw on USA Network and going back further. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. I'm here to talk about something very specific that seems to be going on in WWE. And we got little hints of this from a couple things that happened on that Raw on Netflix debut. First up, the entire show opened with this really wonderfully produced video package narrated by Triple H. And I'm kind of curious if he wrote it or if it was written for him. Clearly, he approved the actual language and he defended it later on in a press release. But during this video package, he specifically used the words heel and face to refer to good guys and bad guys. He referred to the work and the shoot. He referred to the blurring of lines between good guys and bad guys. And I think it very specifically speaks to something that we have seen with Triple H through his first full year of booking, of being the head of creative for WWE, especially with Vince completely gone and out of the picture. How there is this emphasis on 2 very specific things. Number one, how good guys, and he mentioned in the video promo as well, how all great stories are infused with at least a kernel of truth. I'm not saying that's not verbatim, that's paraphrasing, but all great stories have an element of truth in them. And I think it speaks to his desire to pivot away from, and I'll be honest with you, I think Vince McMahon simply got old and out of touch and relied explicitly and exclusively on his own whims Triple H wants the stories to follow some amount of logic and reason, and he wants his character's motivation to make sense. And I think that's something universally we can all appreciate. And I think that's some of what he's saying in that video promo. But the other aspect of it is using what people are referring to as insider terms to talk about the art form of pro wrestling. That's one thing I actually really appreciate about Triple H, is that he always refers, and even in the video package, it shows two things. Number one, a piece of paper being loaded into an old school typewriter, which I know my audience probably skews a little bit on the older side. We all know what typewriters are, right? Anyways, it was the original Notes app. And a painter painting a canvas, a ring mat, a massive ring mat canvas with a really lovely mural of the WWE. And he talks about the importance of the story. And I think the very first thing he says is this goes back to, ancient times, how stories began back then, good versus evil, and how we need these stories in our culture. Very highbrow stuff to talk about the graps. I appreciate the living shit out of that. I really do. To consider the possibilities of an art form that, in my opinion, has been held back, in terms of the WWE anyways, has been held back by Vince McMahon for so long, for Triple H to get to explore the art form in ways that Vince McMahon perhaps was not interested is a very exciting thing. Now, whether or not 10 years from now, we'll look back and be like, oh my God, he really did push the envelope in terms of what could happen in pro wrestling. But when you look at a lot of what Triple H has done over the past year, and I'm honestly trying my hardest not to blow too much smoke up the dude's ass, I think he's accomplished. I think there is a lot of reason to be positive about where WWE is headed, especially compared to where it had been. But there is this whole issue about kayfabe, because this is what his response to somebody asking about that video package during the post-thing press conference. He says, the reaction seems like we did a good job with it. That was the intent, to capture the emotion and let people know we're not hiding what we do. I saw a lot of chatter today from people saying, oh my God, they said heel and face and shoot and work in one promo. We're not hiding what we do. That's what we do. The idea that this is a performance and these are the characters with which we are presenting, and they will be in epic stories that have a kernel of truth, and they will be right, true, and dramatic, to quote the movie Boogie Nights. During the show itself, another little thing happened, and this was incredibly interesting. Very interesting, because it was Michael Cole on commentary talking about Seth Rollins. And he said this on commentary: over 20 years ago, Kobe Lopez, now known as Seth Rollins, a massive CM Punk fan, got into a car and drove from Iowa to the East Coast to try out for CM Punk's training school. Seth Rollins blew Punk away, but he didn't have the money to continue training, so he went home and redefined himself and his craft. They would reunite briefly in NXT. And a lot of people took notice of Michael Cole referring in the moment, in the story, in the universe, to Seth Rollins as Kobe Lopez, meaning he was once this person and now he is evolved into this person, is how I took that. That was my understanding of it. Now, this is all under the auspice of Triple H, who is well known as a guy who's not afraid to blur the lines of kayfabe. Of course, he was punished for, I think it was 18 months for the Madison Square Garden curtain call thing, where him and his best friends, two of whom were departing to WCW, got together in the ring afterwards, even though they were all feuding, and they all gave a big hug. And evidently, even though Vince McMahon said, yeah, it's cool, you can go ahead and do that, afterwards, he got so much blowback from the locker room that he said, well, somebody's got to suffer, somebody's got to get punished. And since Hall and Nash are on their way out the door and Shawn Michaels is my champion, guess what? Triple H, you're getting punished. And I think all the punishment really was, if you actually go back and look at Triple H, this is truly a rant now, by the way. If you go back and you look at Triple H's cage match listings from his punishment, it really wasn't that big of a punishment. They just halted his push for a while. he didn't win King of the Ring that year. Instead, it was Austin, and everything worked out just fine anyways. Really wasn't until Triple H got into DX that his career took off in the way that it should have anyways. But regardless, that's neither here nor there. Triple H is a guy who seems to be fine and even interested in blowing the doors off of kayfabe to a degree. Not blowing the doors off, maybe, but opening up a little bit. Now, if you remember, after that Madison Square Garden incident, like a year or two later, maybe 2 years later, we had the beginning of the Attitude Era, which some people consider Vince McMahon's promo opening Raw in front of it was a pre-taped promo, not one in the crowd, where he said, basically, we're not here to insult your intelligence. We're not here. The days of good guys and bad guys are ostensibly done with. It was very cheesy, over the top Vince McMahon promo saying, what we're doing now is the Attitude Era, basically. And he really didn't need to do that. All he really needed to do was like a presentation change, and then we would have got it, right? We would have understood. We are sophisticated enough to understand. And that's one thing Vince McMahon never gave his audience credit for, being sophisticated enough. And I know using the word sophisticated in the proximity of wrestling fans might be a bit taboo, but I give you guys credit. I do not think that you are a sea of dullards. I think we're all sophisticated enough to know that this is content that we can consume and understand that it is a performance, and yet we can still buy into the stories. Check this out. I referenced this in this last video that I did. It's a book from 1937. I'm going to bring it up on the Kindle thing right here, because I dug this out on my Kindle library. And this is from 1937. Fall Guys, The Barnums of Bounce is the name of this book. And he begins, this is the very beginning of the book. He begins, and this is, by the way, Jim Cornette referenced this book when talking about the origins of insider terminology. And I think it was like some back matter for one of the dark sides of the ring, maybe the Montreal Screwjob, but it's on, you can check this out. It's on YouTube. It's a 3-minute clip of him referencing this book right here. And he basically says, if you want to know all about pro wrestling today, you could just look back at this book from 1937 and it's all there. I think the name of the YouTube video is like Jim Cornette discusses the origins of wrestling terms, something like that. It's easy to find. Anyways, this passage from it, the principals call it working a pro. So he opens the book by talking about a fictional match between two wrestlers who then go backstage and they discuss the fact that they just had a match and they're going to go do this again on the circuit. And he adds this. The principals call it working a program and the fans term it wrestling. Annually, thousands of persons afflicted with wrestleritis, that sounds nasty, pour hundreds of thousands of dollars into the coffers of these behemoths who travel the country from coast to coast working their programs. 98% of those who pay their money to witness these gymnastic dramas and comedies believe it's on the level. It's probably the greatest entertainment spectacle today, containing acrobatics, comedy, buffoonery, pantomime, tragedy, interlude, curtain, and afterpiece. There are all the elements of the theater, including the producer, publicity man, advance agent, stage manager, and prompter, like Shakespeare's famed line, the wrestlers suit the action to the word and the word to the action, and thus create in their bouts what is known as heat, or as Pope expressed it, they awake the soul by tender strokes of art. Pretty good stuff there. You should check that book out. It's on Kindle for like $5. You can get it in paperback edition for like $40, which goes to show, I don't know, it's expensive. Anyways, so I thought that was really interesting that according to this author from 1937, purportedly, most of the people watching wrestling believed it was on the level. Now, I believe that, but I also believe at a certain point, especially if they read this book, they would understand it's not so. And in fact, he explores that idea a little bit later on in the book, the idea of wrestling being on the level or not. Well, that was almost 100 years ago. And I remember a Super Bowl commercial from 1999, I believe, where Vince McMahon punctuated this commercial after seeing all the WWE wrestlers in Titan Towers participating in these elaborate stunts. Vince McMahon at the bottom saying, "Get it?" I know you guys remember. I know you guys know the commercial. I know you know it. I know that in 1994, 1995, whatever it was, Vince McMahon in the steroid trial admitted that wrestling was predetermined, right? We've all known this. I asked my dad who used to go to the Memorial Auditorium here in Sacramento to watch wrestling in the mid-70s. Did people know it was fake? And he was like, yeah, we all knew that it was predetermined. I hate using the word fake, but that's what we're going to use. It's a simpler way of saying predetermined. People knew. But dude, here's the thing. You look at some of the shit from the South back in the day. Oh my God. A lot of those people clearly thought that shit was real. It was presented as very real back then because they were all dudes who kind of looked not in great shape like me, bleeding all over the place, making that shit look pretty real. So, at this point, though, in 2025, coming back around to the video that I did about the Raw Netflix debut, there were a couple comments in the YouTube video and the YouTube comments that I thought were kind of interesting. And I had some little debates here and there with people because I was a bit dismissive in that last video. Giving some static to people who were like, I can't, why are they breaking kayfabe? It took me out of it. For example, this one here from Entron475 says, yes, we know it's a performance. I'm not going to do a voice. Yes, we know it's a performance. You don't see actors using real names or director giving directions and yelling cut during a movie. It's more fun when everyone is committed to just telling a story, whether it's two dudes fighting over a fancy belt or an actor pretending to be a superhero. And then right after that, Cody France says, wait, you're telling me The Undertaker doesn't file taxes? Undertaker, what's next? His real name is something lame like Mark? If he's not an undead wizard in real life, how am I supposed to take the product seriously? So it's two aspects of the same, line of thought. One person saying, I don't like them breaking the law. Why does he call him Kobe Lopez? Took me out of it. The other guy saying, it's all just a show. So here's my response because I saw a lot of the comments made the same point, the same analogy as the movies, right? Somebody appealing to me, of course, saying on Star Trek, you don't hear Spock call Kirk Bill Shatner, right? So here's my counter to that. And again, I'm not saying this as my definitive statement about this. Wrestling is not movies. Wrestling is an incredibly unique form of entertainment. And I say that all caps unique. It takes elements from other forms of entertainment, from other forms of storytelling. It takes elements from theater. It obviously takes elements from sports, live sports. It takes elements from documentaries. It takes elements from movies and television. These days, movies and TV are kind of the closest brother-sister relationship you can get. Oftentimes, especially with prestige television, one of my favorite shows right now is Silo on Apple TV. Now, this is essentially has the budget of like a movie, but it's just told over seasons, like 10 episode seasons or whatever. Separate, the same thing on Apple TV. This is movie quality shit. The Star Trek shows these days on Paramount Plus, oh my God, blow the old Star Trek out of the water in terms of the production value of them. So getting back to wrestling though, it is a singular form of entertainment that borrows here and there, but always adheres to its origins from the carnival days. And even back then, it was a very unique form of entertainment since it came up on television over the past, 50 years or whatever. And it's especially since WWE started doing the weekly wrestling programs on Raw that weren't just like clips from house shows or whatever. Sort of echoing studio wrestling to a degree. It's very unique. It is its own thing, which I think kind of precludes it from those analogies that you make about movies. Yes, it would be incredibly bizarre to hear a director say, cut. But that's because they're filming those movies. They're not happening live in front of you on television. Yes, it would be incredibly bizarre for Spock to yell out Bill Shatner. And yes, to a degree, it would be weird to see, not to a degree, it would absolutely be weird to see a producer like Bobby Roode come down and start issuing directions. So let's get into what they should not do, because that's definitely one of them. Because a lot of you have questions like, what am I supposed to believe? What am I not supposed to believe? You are sophisticated enough to determine that on your own. One of the biggest moments that happened in wrestling for me in 2024, relatively recently, was the New Day segment. And I think you can look at that as an idea as to what wrestling is at its best. And not in terms of like, not obviously the in-ring stuff, even though this took place in the ring, but it was a moment. It was a promo moment between characters with a rich history in which they threw a story plot twist at us that almost nobody saw coming and generated a big emotion and a lot of chatter. And everybody was swerved by this and they were taken aback by it. It was like, oh my God, this moment was everything. And you can replicate that in the ring. You can talk about this happening in matches. Whether this is the easiest one in the world, but like Cody beating Roman Reigns for the title as a big moment to be like, oh my God, that was so cool. Whatever. There are certain things, obviously, they shouldn't do and would be silly for them to do. For example, showing them talking about putting matches together. There was that picture that leaked where all the wrestlers were there ringside, and I think Triple H was in the ring, and I think this was simply a pre-production meeting telling everybody this is what's going to happen. You guys are going to have a match and you're going to win and you're going to lose and you're going to have a match, you're going to win. Then they break off probably into their own producers. They obviously should not show that. That's obvious, right? There are certain things where, yes, you can make the extreme argument that, well, I don't want them to be palling around and being best friends backstage. And we see that and then they go out there and they're blood. Yeah, I get it. That's an extreme argument that they shouldn't do. And I really doubt they would, because there are certain things that absolutely would disrupt the integrity of the show. I think one thing, showing on television rivals getting along and joking around would be one of those things that would disrupt the integrity of the show. Why would they do that? The things that they do on television should enhance the story. When Michael Cole refers to Seth Rollins as Kobe Lopez, he's bringing it to reality, but in a way, in my opinion, and you could disagree and that's fine. If it's offensive to you, then even in the smallest sense, I don't mean it enhances the realism of it. Before he was Seth Rollins, he was Kobe Lopez, a guy who hadn't found his way yet. I love that idea. I think that's interesting. I think that's unique to pro wrestling. It's not Bill Shatner and Kirk. This is the same person, not a character. This is the same person, but as he has leveled up his career, he became this person, Seth Rollins. I like that idea. I think it's cool. I think it's interesting, and I think it's unique to pro wrestling. But yeah, I mean, obviously, showing rivals going over a match is something that doesn't enhance the story. It just kills the integrity of the show. Now, what you view as killing the integrity of the show, breaking kayfabe in whatever way you want to say it, that's up to you. If that takes you out of the show and you're like, this is crap, I don't want to watch that, then don't watch it. 1,000% don't watch it and complain about it all you want in the WrestleJuice comments. That's totally cool. You should do that. For me, I appreciate that they're trying to push those boundaries a little bit, because pro wrestling, I think, deserves a little kick in the pants. I think that it couldn't hurt to try to keep up with the times and be like, hey, we all know this is a performance. I know what's going on. You know what's going on. Now allow us to tell our stories. And there will be certain things that will be off limits in terms of we're trying to preserve the integrity of the story. But I think that was kind of a cool risk to take for Michael Cole to, in this instance, and I don't expect they're going to do it for everybody. I don't expect he's going to be like, oh, here comes Drew Galloway. There's Drew McIntyre. That's his real name. I don't think it's, I think this was meant for drama, for the sake of drama in the wrestling. And I think it's interesting, and I have ever since Triple H took over, I've given him the benefit of the doubt because I think Paul Levesque, I think that he has done a good job, and I think that he has got an interesting take on pro wrestling that is a little bit different than Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, up until 30 years after cutting the promo of, we're not going to insult your intelligence, tried to tell us that LA Knight, Eli Drake, Sean Richter, I think his real name is, but LA Knight in NXT was a completely different individual named Max Dupree. Max Dupree. He completely ignored, unless every once in a while he'd be like, okay, go ahead and say the letters IWGP. He would try still, up until his last hours of being involved in WWE, he would try to act like this person that we've seen in WWE is a completely different human being. With the exception of one line, he tried to get us to believe that Pete Dunne was a dude named Butch. And yes, there was one line that tried to explain that they were the same person, but all of a sudden he was acting completely different, like an entirely different human being. Triple H, I think, understands that we are sophisticated enough to be okay with there being other pro wrestling and wrestlers with other histories, and they don't need to be completely different human beings, because that is actually more insulting to our intelligence than simply presenting somebody who comes in from a different place and then over time organically having their character shift their motivations and ambitions. So anyways, I have ranted way too long about this. I'm almost at 30 minutes and I meant to go like 15 today. I went long. So again, I don't have a lot of answers because it's not up to me. It's up to you to determine what you think is too much breaking of kayfabe, I guess, to justify or to hurt the integrity of the show, to compromise the integrity of the universe that we all watch and enjoy, hopefully. So anyways, thought it was interesting because I thought a lot of these conversations were interesting that you're having here in the comments of my WrestleJuice video. And with civility, please continue to have those conversations in the comments below, and I'll abstain from saying things dismissively like it's not 1985 anymore, and I apologize if I came off as dismissive in that video. So by all means, go ahead and have civil discussions in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I appreciate you letting me rant and rave with almost no graphics to show you except for the one Kindle book, which was weird. But anyways, thanks for watching, everybody. See you guys around.